super annoying. Even that, I'm not saying that's God, right? But are we reflecting that we see God in them? Or are we trying to kind of force and shape and make sure that they end up reflecting God when they're a grown up, when they're older, when they're, right? So our job as parents is always about what's happening right now. And is the way I'm interacting with my kid right now going to give them the message that I see them as a child of God, right? That I see God in them? Or is it going to give them the message of you better look like God? You don't look like God right now and you need to look like God. Again, those are two different messages that are going to influence how we interact with our kids. And by the way, I forgot to say this caveat at the start. I don't do any of this very well. I just try. And so I'm not pretending that I do, right? So who are we raising? We can think of it too. I don't know if you guys experience this. It's not recorded, so I feel safe saying it. Let's say you're a servant or you're interacting with kids, even at church, and there's a certain time you're going to be strict. You're going to be, right, like serious. And then when it comes to Abuna's kids, maybe they get a little bit more leeway. Maybe they get a little bit more like patience, a little different response before like the servant will get strict with them. Maybe, right? How much more God's kids? And so when we feel entitled to our kids, then we're gonna treat them, right, with this like mine, right? And when we realize we're entrusted with them, but they belong to somebody else, it's going to influence how we're able to interact with them. So the more awareness we have of who they are, and like Archie was sharing with us, who we are as children of God too, the more we're going to be able to reflect that in the approaches we take with them. So if you ask yourself, what's a more important focus? Who you want your child to grow up into, right? What kind of person you want them to grow up into, or the parent that you want to be? Which one would you say, if we had to put it on a scale, is more important? The parent? How come? Great. It's the only thing that's happening right now, right? And sometimes we see something in our kids, let's say 8-year-old, 12-year-old, 16-year-old, and we say, if we don't nip this right now, imagine at 36 years old what that's going to look like. And now we're parenting a 36-year-old instead of a 6-year-old, right? And so the only thing that matters right now is our approach, right? Is our parenting, is our what's appropriate for this 6-year-old, for this 8-year-old, right? And it might look different for one than the other. And again, that's very Christ-like, because what Christ gave was very individualized to who was in front of him and what they needed at that moment, right? So we want to be thinking, are we meeting our kids' needs, not just at their age, because sometimes that's a very limited way to look at it, but just developmentally where they're at and what they're needing in this moment. So a couple of things that can help us is to remember that God doesn't create bad. We all have different temperaments, right? So temperament is similar to personality, not the exact same thing, but someone's going to be more quiet, more reserved, like we were talking about earlier. Somebody's going to be more impulsive, quick to speak, right? You know what? I want to try first and trip all over myself and figure it out from there. That's a certain type of temperament. And the others is very cautious and very, I need all the information before I decide what to do, or quiet, or some people are going to be affectionate. Some people are going to be, so none of that is bad, right? It's what we do with that can sometimes interfere. Sometimes we need to mature in a place that we're limited, and same with our kids. But we don't want to look at it like their personality is bad, okay? And a lot of, let's say, common one, rambunctious boys, right, are given the message that they're bad, right, because they're too loud, or they're not still in church, or they're not, they don't raise their hand in class, or they don't, so they're constantly getting corrected, and the message they get is, I'm bad, right? So these kind of examples we can think of is it's not about the the temperament or the personality that we're trying to change. Okay. Um, and it's not about what we want it to look like, right? Sometimes we want our kids to be a certain thing, like Archie was talking about with the football dad kind of thing. Um, I definitely have a strong desire of how athletic I want my kids to be, and a strong awareness of I'm not they have no hope if it's my genetics, right? So it's not about what I want and desire, right? For it to look like. It's just how can I support them with the things that they want to explore, right? Um, and similarly, what do they care about? What's their we're not all given the same gifts, but we're all given gifts, right? And again, if we don't appreciate the gifts that our kids are given, then that's not what we're gonna water and grow. Be like, yeah, that's cool, but what about this? And so paying attention to what is it that they're really for, and what's a way that I can foster that. Uh-huh. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. It's really hard, and again, this is Archie was saying too, everything is so individual, right? But when we get to the practical, one thing we can think of as parents is we set the boundaries, right? And if we skip this part of the self-awareness piece, we'll just pretend that it's boundary setting when really it's like filling my own needs. Okay? And there's many versions of what it can look like that's appropriate, right? But sometimes the boundaries might be like screen limits, let's say. Then as long as the kids are within the boundaries, that's okay. Sometimes, not all the time, it could be I want you to do one extracurricular, right? But if that's the boundary, then there's a lot of choice in between of what that is, right? Um, and if after the season you don't like this, so each season, let's say, right, of whether it's be music related or sports related, if that's the boundary, then they're not stuck to it for the rest of their life, even if that's what they're better at than something else. So these are ways we can still set boundaries, we can set the limits and the expectations, right, as parents, but then foster their sense of choice. Because at the end of the day, everything, even everything necessary, but definitely everything extra, if it's for my parents, they'll lose the desire, like automatically, because I'm not doing it for me anymore. Doing it because I know dad gets really proud of me when I do well in this sport. And that's a lot of pressure that I take with me, or whatever other version. So we want to help them grow into making the choices. Um, and to see our kids as whole individuals, not one particular thing, right? So the and again, we give the opportunities and we can set the the um, the limits, but we want to give them a lot of choice in what it means to foster their spirituality and emotional wellness and physical, right, development. The more we're seeing them as a whole individual and not just highlighting one, not like everything school, 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 or sports, 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 or even church, 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 right? It's a whole person that that we're that we're raising. And Christ sees the whole person. Again, this is what I was saying earlier of whoever was in front of them, he gave that person what he needed. So the leper who was never touched, he touched that leper and healed him, right? The Samaritan woman, um, she got that one-on-one interaction that was enough for her to completely change her life, right? And it was through the relationship, it was through the interaction, it was through the way that Christ saw her that happened. And that's what we want to be able to provide to our kids, right? Is in this kind of order of Jesus looked. This is for the young ruler who had trouble with what Christ told him to sell his possessions, right? Look, first, Christ looked at him. He saw what he really needed. Then Christ loved him, and then Christ spoke. Sometimes we speak first, and then we say, the thing that I spoke, however it came out, it's just because I love him, right? Just because I love him. And then we look at the aftermath. We look if it's working or not. And so Christ told us other direction. We have to see who's our kid in front of us, and at this moment, who they are, right? Love them, and then give them what they need. I'll share an example of, I'm sure I'll talk bad about myself later. This one's a good example. Okay, so my daughter, yesterday, in the morning, she was already kind of like a little bit grumpy, right? And then, but it's fine. We're working. And then I hear all these little beads crumble onto the floor, and this her favorite bracelet that she had gotten from the monastery, which we don't go to the monastery very often, right? Once ever. So is ruined, right? And in my mind, the only reason I did this, by the way, is I knew I was giving a talk tomorrow, so I had to right? Is in my mind, right? But what I wanted to say is, were you playing with it? I told you not to play with it. It's gonna break. And then I wanted to say, oh, it's okay. We'll get you a new one. It's not that expensive or anything like that. And then I wanted to say, okay, let's clean it up, and then we'll. So all these things I had to notice, what I wanted to say, but why? Either, the truth is, it's hard for me to see her sad. And all these things would spare me from seeing her sad, right? But all she needed in that moment was to be sad, right? So I just went over to her and we hugged for a little bit, and she cried for a little bit. We went about our day. But an example of, are we meeting our needs or their needs? And if we don't know what's happening inside of us, we won't be able to answer that question. Okay? Sometimes we look at our kids through this lens of all our own stuff, right? Maybe marriage problems, maybe the way I was brought up, or self-consciousness, or what are other people going to think, or these kind of societal pressures, or pressures from their grandparents, or from people at church, or all these things that tells us who our kid is, right? We're looking at it through all these things instead of who they actually are, right? So all of those other things belong to us, not to them. So we want to notice them, okay? And it's a hard thing to hear, a hard thing it could be a little bit uncomfortable, right? And so we want to let uncomfortable be okay, because if we're sitting with the uncomfortable inside of us, right, we're gonna have a better chance at taking care of that part, or accepting that we're not going to be perfect, or doing all these other things. That now that's what I get to give to my kid, right? Get to give to my kid a parent who is taking care of the parent's stuff to take care of, right? Instead of a parent who's needing me to take care of it for them because they're not aware of it, or not working on some of these things. Okay? So some of the things that can get in our way of being able to do this, right? And then we'll go to what it could look like. Okay? The biggest one is when we rely on ourselves instead of on God. And we think of them as my kid's up to me. Everything, like their whole future, and what even what I'm going to be judged on is it's all up to me. And we take that in a very, through my own limitations, is the only power that I have, right? So I'll give a personal example. When my daughter was born, I was already a psychologist. I already worked with kids a lot, parents a lot. He was a pretty easy baby. Obviously, it's easy for the dad to say when they're a baby, especially, right? But for me, it was pretty. And she's starting to speak, and um, I don't know. At that age, I feel like I taught her tricks, like a puppy. Like look what she could do. And I probably wouldn't have said it out loud, but I was like feeling good about myself, right? Like look what we were able to teach. Okay. Then my son was born. Okay, and my son was born with a lot of issues, and we won't go into that whole story. But I'll tell you some of the things the doctors said at the start. Okay, we don't know if he'll live. Right? We don't know if he'll speak. If he does, we don't know if he'll read. We don't know if he'll be able to walk or run, right? And so, oh no, if I was leaving it up to me this whole time, what can I do about any of that? It was a big lesson for me that I don't want it to be up to me. If it's up to me, he's done for, right? And so thank God he's doing great. You guys probably heard him screaming and climbing on me and doing all and he could read. And when those things are happening, like different than maybe at the first with my daughter, oh, that's not me. Thank God, right? That's God. That applies to my daughter too, right? It applies to all of us, is when we remember that we're limited. And so we want to be limited in what we're able to offer in the good, right? And instead of relying on us, we want to rely on him, like Archie was saying too, especially in those moments where I know right now, God, they have a very impatient father. They have a very irritated father. They have all those things that I'm limited. So I can't rely on me right now. What do you have for me? Again, when that's our awareness, we're giving God an opportunity to work through us, right? And when it's not our awareness, we're accepting, no, whatever I'm limited to, that's what my kid is going to get. Okay, so it's really freeing, actually, to, especially as Christians, to be aware of our limitations and our connection to someone who's unlimited, right? So another thing that can get in our way is concern with the wrong perception. Okay? Instead of how God sees my kid, instead of how God sees how I'm honoring the role that he gave me as parent, we worry too much about how other people see it, right? I see they do no screen time, and so if I have to do no screen time, but it's not for my kid. It's not even necessarily what I believe. It's for the perception of others, right? Or whatever other example. Sitting still in church, all these things, okay? If we're not focused on the right perception, then we're gonna get in our own way, right? And so thinking about too these bigger categories, like we want for your question, right? What's the category? We want their mind to be stimulated and them to be learning, right? Can we foster that instead of only grades? We want a relationship with Christ and a connection to the church. Can we foster that instead of bright and early on Sunday fast, reducing it to behaviors, right? Is how can we foster what it looks like for them in these broader categories that we want to be fostering, okay? Another big one is trying to control the outcome. I've already decided what my kid needs, and so I'm just going to make it look that way. And when we have the way they should speak, the way they should act, the way they should X, Y, and Z, then I'm trying too much to control. Again, not giving the right person the control, and not giving my kid a sense of feeling seen or understood or supported. Okay? These ones I'll say together, but essentially when our own issues get put on our kids. So a common example is, let's say, there's marital problems, right? There's the parents are disconnected, and there's a loud kid, okay? But when dad comes home from work, he's really irritated. And so we have to make sure we're very quiet. But it's not actually for teaching our kids indoor voices or whatever that means or whatever that is. It's because the whole family suffers if this kid is just a kid. They're at their appropriate volume. It's not because that's a problem. It's because the reaction would be the problem, right? Or sometimes one parent is super strict and super consequence and punishment and this kind of stuff, and the other parent is going to be too lenient to make up for it. And the kid is on this seesaw, right? But I'm parenting now to compensate for the other person instead of what this kid needs individually. So sometimes too, our own past experiences, right? Let's say a parent who got yelled at a lot, okay, might fear having boundaries or limits with their kid, might fear saying no to their kid because they don't want to be seen the same way they experienced their parent, right? But their parent, that was the whole picture, not just in an appropriate moment where it needs some sternness, needs some strictness. So sometimes if we're not paying attention to our own stuff that's influencing, we're just going to react, and it's not going to help us feeling like we're being intentional and our choices are connected to what our kids actually need. Okay, so a couple of practical takeaways, right, of what we can do. One is we want to be a role model, like Archie was saying, not so our kid can see, right? But we want to, kind of like what I was saying with the bracelet example, I don't want to come up here and say things that I don't actually believe are important for me to put into practice, right? And so same with our kids, we don't want to be telling them things that are important for them that we don't feel are important for us, right? And so the more we have that mindset, the more that's just naturally going to get conveyed without words. So we want to avoid, are the things our kids seeing us say and do different than what we're asking of them, right? The words that we're using, the things that we're watching, the time we're on our screens, all this stuff, is it different than what we're asking of our kids, okay? And to remember that our biggest parenting tool is the way we model our own lives. Okay, so first, our spiritual life. Archie, once in a different talk, was sharing how his son one time walked in on him in a tough moment, fully just praying with his heart out in their prayer room, and he said that was a better sermon about the importance of prayer than anything I could have explained to my kid, right? So are we approaching our spiritual life that way? So let's say when we're fasting, are we fasting with complaining and with maybe like cheating, with all this stuff? And so we're going to teach our kids that fasting is just, it's like a performance, and you have to perform the right way, instead of what is it that we would even say to ourselves about why we're fasting or coming to church or going to confession or all of these things, okay? Same with managing stress and frustration. It's really easy to be irritated ourselves or lose our cool or even be overly worried or all this stuff, and then tell our kids there's nothing to worry about, or hey, the way you said that's inappropriate, or correct theirs, because to us, our response makes sense to the situation. The situation calls for that response, but their situation doesn't, right? Because we can look at it through adult lenses. So the more we're doing the things to manage our own stress, and frustration, and anxiety and worries, the more we're going to create space for them to come and cry and we're okay, right? For them to be irritating and we can talk instead of lash out. For them to, even break a rule or be disrespectful. And at the end of the day, the way we handle that, we get to feel like we modeled Christ in that moment, okay? Including too the way we talk about others, the other sex, the other people at church, the clergy, all these things. Are we speaking in a way of what we're trying to convey? Okay. Another, like, if there's one thing that I would say to all parents, behavior is overrated. like focusing on behavior is overrated, okay? Because a kid can look really good. And a lot of times, actually, we see one really good kid and one quote unquote troublemaker kid. And this troublemaker gets all this energy, and we're trying to fix and correct and all this stuff. And the good kid is the one that ends up in our office as a teenager or as an adult or because there's all this pressure. I'm not actually being quote unquote good for the right reasons. It's this that's my role in the family, if that makes sense. Okay? So trying to make it look a certain way is very overrated. And instead of focusing on behavior, we want to focus on connection. So what does my child enjoy? Okay? We grew up playing basketball. Um, my dad did not really play sports. Okay? So I can remember a couple of times he came out and played basketball with us, and it was hilarious. I promise you, it was like it was not like he made us any better at basketball. Okay, but I remember because it was him coming to meet us where we're at, right? So same thing with our kids. And we were talking about this earlier as one of the questions. Should I join my kid doing X, Y, or Z, even if I don't really find it entertaining or all that helpful? Or my question would be, are they allowed to do it, right? Is the boundary that this is something they're allowed to do? And if they're allowed to do it, then we should be making an effort to understand what that is that we're allowing them to do and connecting with them on it. And so are they allowed to watch these videos? Then by all means share with me what you're doing and what you're finding funny and what you're finding enjoyable. Different than, maybe opening things up to them that you don't feel that they're ready for. Finding some demand-free, agenda-free one-on-one time. A lot of times kids are on to us, come, I want to talk to you. So, oh man, heavy. Even if it's not punitive, it's going to be a heavy conversation. But we want to find times to just be, right? So finding something that speaks to your kid, and especially if there's already a strain like we were talking about earlier, letting it be weird at first, awkward at first. They have to learn that you don't have an agenda, right? So is it going one-on-one and one-on-one time's also really important, even if it's just like 20 minutes. So going out somewhere, doing Lego together, cooking, these sorts of things, if they're up for it, not forcing that issue, but things where there's a lot of space. Because it's not uncommon for how was school today? Fine. Who'd you hang out with? Nobody. Oh, my kid doesn't like to talk to me. The kids don't like to be interviewed, right? And kids are on to us too about, it's like, are you really interested or are you wanting information, right? So a conversation is two ways. Sure, I ask questions, but also make comments. I share too, right? And it's not this kind of pressure to extract information. So having time where it is agenda-free or it is just play, it's going to invite more of that conversation too, okay? And we can share with them too, right? Stuff that's happened to us or things that we struggle with, right? When Archie was sharing of ask, right? What do you like about the way I'm parenting? What do you not like? We can also share, this is something I'm working on. I notice I'm snapping lately. I don't like that. I don't want to do that. I'm probably going to end up doing it again because it's hard for me. But I want you to know that I'm working on it, and it's something I'm trying, right? And so, again, individualize if it's appropriate or not, age-wise, relationship-wise, all these things. But I'm giving an example of this is a relationship, right? As opposed to, let's say, and the next point on there is asking for forgiveness when I fall short. When I do something that is wrong. Is it only kids that are supposed to ask for forgiveness, or are we also? Okay? You know what? I didn't understand that when I reacted that way. Now that I understand what you were saying, I just want to say sorry, right? Or whatever it is. We're actually modeling what we want from them in an authentic way, okay? And now it's a back and forth thing instead of a one-sided thing that we're expecting from them, okay? So we already talked a little bit about this one, but we don't want to be on either extreme. So Permissive is the type of parent that can't set boundaries, that can't set limits. And this is very dangerous to kids because they're not able yet to manage their own limits. Okay? So, full access to everything too early is going to be too overwhelming and can get kids some trouble, right? And the flip side is authoritarian. This is where I control everything, and they're not even allowed to make the mistake, right? They're not even allowed to have the opportunity to mess up or to get into any issue or to, right? And so it's very controlling, and when they do step out of line, they're immediately punished. And the problem with that is two things. One, that only works when the threat of the punishment is there. So it gets kids very good at being sneaky, okay? Because now I don't actually believe that it's a problem. I just am avoiding the punishment, okay? And then we're not teaching kids how to think, okay? We're teaching them how to avoid punishment, okay? So setting plans ahead of time. What are the boundaries? What happens if you do step out of the boundaries, right? Naming when you're giving them, when you're noticing improvement in whatever it is that you're working on. Keeping yourself regulated and staying consistent. Because when one day it's this and the next day it's that, can be very confusing for kids, okay? And then we can even, it was the end of the day, we're trying to shape a healthy thought process, okay? So the thing to avoid in that is lectures, okay? And you don't believe me, just think I've been up here probably like 20-something minutes lecturing. Think about how many times you spaced out. And you're here by your own like choice, right? And so when we're lecturing our kids, I guarantee you they're not choosing to be lectured, and they're just spacing out all the more. And you might as well just be talking to a wall at that point. They're going to be happy to nod their head, right? And say, I've heard this before, but they're in another place, okay? But when we're shaping a healthy thought process, we're asking questions, right? Maybe even before they make a decision that we know is not going to go well, right? We're just asking, hey, how do you think that's going to go? Okay. Any other things you would want to think about ahead of time? Okay, I have a thought. You want me to share the thought? Or do you feel like you got it covered, right? Where it's not that we have to spill out all of our adult information and worries and all of this and try to force, okay? Even when correcting, there's a room for, now I'm not saying giving them the choice, okay? But also helping them understand where you're coming from. Hey, I said if you did this, this is what's going to happen. And now you did it, right? So what do you think should happen? And getting them involved too in understanding what it is we're correcting and why, right? And that's going to help them too with thinking through things, right? Realizing what's coming on the other side of a choice. And then there's a lot of situations about their own life for sure, but even just things around them that you can ask their opinion on. See where they're coming from, then be happy that you're hearing from them. The goal in that moment isn't to, well, no, that's not right, because then they're not going to share with you. But to get their opinion and understand where they're coming from is really helpful for us as parent, and it shows us that we respect too, that they have a lot to offer us. There's a lot that we can learn from them too. Okay? Mm-hmm. 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 I think so. That's a really like common one, right? And it's gonna be an unsatisfying answer because it's not a should. Sometimes there's some shoulds involved, right? But when we're gonna decide something like that as parenting, as a is how do we why, right? And what do we want to convey? And we want things to be fair, but fair is not necessarily identical, right? And so there's going to be times where your 17-year-old can drive, right? Or I don't know if she actually can or not, but like age-wise. So the the 15-year-old is not fair. I don't have my license. It's a little just clear cut why, right? You gotta wait a little bit. So sometimes there's room for that, but whenever we're setting these kind of boundaries and expectations, it's not fair for us to also expect our kids to understand and like it. Thank you so much, Dad, for explaining it to me, and now I understand. Thank you, right? Oh, I didn't see it this way. Thank you so much for explaining to me the error of my ways. Sometimes we expect that from our kids too. So as parents, we have to tolerate, okay, that they're not gonna like some of the things that we do or some of the rules in the house. But if we can't tolerate that, then we're just spend time convincing them why we're right, and they're gonna hate it even more. So it's okay that they're not happy with us sometimes. That's safe. That's part of a healthy relationship too. And actually, spouses that don't know how to not disagree, how to disagree, that's not very healthy, right? We have to know that there's going to be some times, and then how do we connect even when that's the case, right? So same with our kids. So this one's a little bit redundant. So the main point that I didn't say here, when we're fostering a healthy sense of self, we want to take authentic times to highlight what's really great about our kids, what God gifted them. So if I just walk up, my daughter, I think she's funny, but she definitely thinks she's funny. Okay, so if I just walk up to her randomly, I'm like, "You're funny." But if she's sharing a joke or says something witty, and then I say, "Oh, Kayla, you're so funny," it's this moment that led me to reflect that back, right? Or to my son, "You're." If I just go tell him that right now, he's probably like stealing something from somebody else right now, anyways, right? It's not going to make sense. But in a moment that he's caring about his sister, and then I share that. So for us, we have to be on the lookout for these moments because everybody, even the tougher kids, have these moments. And we actually, for the tougher kids, more important to be on the lookout for those moments because those are the ones that they're missing. Right? And we don't want to just say good job, good behavior. We want to talk to the quality we see in them because that's the sense of self that we're trying to increase. And another, for a more timid kid, thing that we can do is give them some responsibilities that are exciting, even above their age appropriateness, right? So cooking, for example, if like my son, when he was 4 or 5, he was like cracking eggs over the stove, okay? So with supervision, with support, don't call CPS on me or anything. But he feels so big when he's able to crack the egg and it sizzles on the fire. And there are times where like, oh boy, right? Like, so sometimes with appropriate supervision, right? Of another good one, if you don't have an electric car, teaching them to pump the gas. I get out of the car, I do the credit card thing, I take the thing, I put it in, feel big, right? It might take twice as long. Eventually, you're not gonna have to get out at all, though. That's the positive. But the idea of what can we do to help them capable, to help them feel confident? That's exciting to them, not just for us. Okay? So we want to remember we're always gonna fall short, even of our best intentions. But we have someone on our side that's perfect, right? And willing to, like Archie was saying, treat us with that same compassion and forgiveness, okay? And our kids are a reflection of him. We don't just want to explain that over and over. We want to help them feel that through our eyes, okay? So that means we have to see that that's who we are also. And we want to, everything is progress. When we can't handle like the distance that where we want them to end up is, we'll lose sight of that and we'll focus on this kind of future version. But if they're moving forward in small ways, then they're making progress. Okay? And so there's an immense power in prayer. So praying for each other, having a community where there's not this pressure to make our kids look a certain way or to one up each other, how my kid's doing versus how your kid's doing, but to have these kind of relationships with other parents where you know you're supporting each other and praying for each other can be very helpful too. That's it. Uh-huh. Focusing on behaviors. Yeah. Can I ask how old the child is? 9 and 11. Okay. So first of all, I didn't mean to unlock like a fear of sometimes kids are just well behaved and that's great, right? Yeah, no, I know, yeah, that's not what you're saying. So some things we can look out for, right? Of let's say there's a test coming. What happens to our kids stress? How stressed out are they? How much is this all consuming? How kind of we can notice our kids' own expectations, right, of themselves, and when really high expectations, it can come from that kind of place sometimes. So that's one way to assess. And another is just to ask, not so it doesn't have to be so on the nose kind of questions, but just um how they're doing, right? Like um how do you feel about how class is going or church, right? All the same kind of what do you like about the way I'm parenting? What do you not? Can be about any. What do you like about church? Okay, what do you like about school? What feels harder? And you just open up some opportunity for them to share things that feel hard. That's a good sign. If they're sharing with you what feels hard, is a good sign that it's not coming from this pressure kind of place. Sure. Yeah. Hmm. It's a balance, and it's always a balancing act. And I think that's sometimes why it's like, actually, that's why the question about how am I approaching it is so important. Because if it's all about do they feel this way, do they not feel this way? Are they doing school for them? Are they doing school? All of the answers are in their hands about how we're doing, what they think about us. And that's a lot of pressure to put on our, but am I conveying straight A's or else you're sleeping outside, right? Or am I, that's obviously an extreme, but am I, what happens when they get a B? How do I respond? So now those same topic, but the questions are self-reflective on does this match with what they're capable to do in a balanced way, right? Without overloading. Does it match with there's room for not being perfect, right? Does it match with the way I want to be parenting in a godly way? So we want the self-reflective questions, not the child-directed outcome kind of question. So first off, threat or reward means there's an expectation set, right? So first and foremost, we want the expectation to be appropriate to the kid, right? Not appropriate to our own wants and needs. Okay, so let's assume that it is. Then, if everything is reward punishment, do this and I'll give you this, or if you don't do this, will inflict this, right? Um, you are signing yourself up for, okay, go do the dishes. Well, why, right? You're signing yourself up for constant negotiation. Yes, bargaining, okay? So not everything has to be threat or reward. And then, ideally, we don't want either one of those. We want natural consequences. So by consequences, I don't mean bad, like punishment. A consequence is not bad. A consequence is just something that comes next, okay? So for example, when we're setting boundaries, let's say I'm okay with a half-hour show from 7 to 7:30. Okay, let's say. I'm not saying that's better, worse, whatever. Okay? Well, what's the way to unlock that? Okay? Our teeth are brushed and our homework's done, and we're done with dinner. TV can be on from 7 to 7:30. Now, we're setting things up to work with our kids to have their things done. You need any help? Let me know, right? But 7 o'clock comes and it's not done. Oh, I wanted you to have that show too. What's left, right? 7:10 comes. All right, you get 20 minutes. Awesome, not bad. Okay. Hey, what can we do tomorrow to get the full half hour? So now we set things up appropriately for them, and there's a natural kind of consequence, right? You bring home a C, or you talk back to me, therefore you're grounded for a week. There's nothing natural about that, right? And a lot of times it's our own kind of impulsive, reactive response. So the more natural something is, the more we're actually teaching them. And the more it's just like reward punishment, then we're training them to be puppies, like I was doing to Sayla when she was. Uh-huh. Exactly. And so if you're, and that's why sometimes we have to be okay. We have to make sure the expectation is reasonable. I can't repeat that enough, right? But then from there, we get to work with our kids, right? We get to work with our kids to, and they have a lot of choice. So say like in that example that I said, um, there's a lot of choice in the order I do things, or even in the freedom to not jump into it right away, or even so I have a lot of agency that I'm giving my kid within the boundaries that I'm setting for them, and I'm teaching them about the world in that way. Yeah, I agree. I agree. So so the world will be her natural consequence now, right? And your job is to help her navigate the world, right? And make her choices now without so much mom and dad being the deliverer of those, but the world is going to be the deliverer of the natural consequence. So just like in Archie's example of some behaviors can get you to jail, right? And so like, then you punish them, well, like what the jail was for, right? It's more about how do we still convey love and connection? What do we do from here, right? And accept that a lot of it, the older our kids get, the more it is up to them. And so when they're younger, it's really easy to control outcome. It's really easy to make them do something, right? Because we have a lot of control. But if we're leaning on that, then they get 12, 13, 15, 17, and we don't have that same control anymore. And I've been kind of leaning on making it the way I need it to, right? So that's why we We want to be shaping their thought process, not their behavior. Oh,
Had a workshop up some parenting tips for healthy communication. So, so you can, just see, have 0 to 5 and then 12. You can share any of these slides in email that we'll send registered, but I'll just read them out loud to you all, and then if you have any questions. Sorry, there's a workshop, but at least I wanted to give you these. When we're talking with really tiny little ones, okay, we want to speak at eye level. Like, so if you're thinking, if you're talking to a 3-year-old and here's a parent, it's really hard, but we really want much floor time as you can. You want to be eye to eye because it's a lot more neutral and a positive interaction when one parent isn't on top of them and how they're speaking. We want to name and validate emotions. Use really simple, clear language. So if you're like me and you like to use big words because you think it makes you sound smart, but you're talking to a 3-year-old and they have no idea what the word inappropriate means, and you're like, that's inappropriate. And it's like, well, what does inappropriate mean? So we want to make sure our language matches, and it's good to be clear. It's good to be simple. There's nothing wrong with that. Give choices as much time as we can. Use positive instruction. So instead of saying, don't run, what do we want to say? Please walk. Okay? Instead of saying, don't hit, say, be gentle. Okay? Because what we're training is, what's the goal? The goal is gentleness, to love. The goal is to respect church. The goal isn't to not run. Because outside I can run, right? Being in the park I can run. There's nothing wrong with running. So what makes it something different here? So again, we're trying to give the positive instruction. Use play to communicate. We had one of our speakers one time, she just works with children playing. She's a therapist, and that's all she does, playing. But that's like the most powerful thing. Communicate through play. You get a lot from kids when you play with them. Don't underestimate the power of playing. Talk about the little things, because that's how later on they will talk to you about the big things, and use redirection whenever possible. So not everything has to be, like you need to know the reason why you can't do this. Sometimes it's like, okay, how about this instead? And with time, that redirection helps to gear towards the right thing. Any questions about the 0 to 5 age group? I think I see a lot more. Okay, so the middle childhood years, 6 to 12, we want to encourage questions and curiosity. Use, again, simple, clear, direct language that they understand. Again, but now it's dialed up a little bit because we're talking to children who are now in elementary. Want to listen patiently without interrupting their thoughts. So if you're like me, and I think the speakers did such a good job conveying the same message of like, okay, now I know how to answer or what the question is. So then we give what we think our children need, but letting them share thoughtfully all the way through, praise effort, and not just accomplishment. There's so much research out there about when kids stop trying. Stop trying when the praise is outcome oriented, right? So if a kid hears, "You're so smart," and I'll wait till the group comes so we'll have a little bit more time. But this is one of my favorite research projects that they did about process praise. So they had two groups of children. They gave them both the same math test. One group of the kids who took the math test, they said, "You're so smart, like you're such a bright kid. Can't believe you answered all these questions well," okay? And they did the same test with another group, and they said, "You worked really hard on these math problems. Like, you put in a lot of effort because you took your time." And then they gave, the kids on average did about the same in both groups. Then they gave them a harder, much harder math test to the same group of kids who averaged the same in their scores. The group that heard, "You're so smart and you're so bright," did worse than the kids who heard, "You are working hard, you're taking your time." Because what was praised was the process, right? The effort, okay? Versus the kids who heard, "You're so smart and you're so good at this." So it's, at least for me, like I have to be very careful of how I praise, and what I'm actually helping my child understand is the worthwhile thing of what they're doing. Okay, we want to also acknowledge and validate feelings. The feelings and acknowledgement piece from 0 to 15, 20, like that never ends, but now we're using a lot more complex language. It's not just happy or sad. We talk about disappointed. We talk about, you felt not just frustrated, but maybe you felt like incompetent. Like we can introduce bigger words, like you're missing something that you wish you had, or a skill that you haven't learned yet. So now we're giving them different words for their emotions. Want to also, I love that John talked a lot about boundaries and explained their importance, and not just why not just the boundary, but why it's also there. Now we share family stories that teach values. I think we in the Coptic Orthodox Church, we have such a rich treasure trove of saint stories, and we tell a lot from what we pass on, but also we have those things in our own families. When Teta did this, and the way that Giddu served, and I think our kids are hungry for those things. So we teach them through stories and personally the things that are impactful for us, and then spend quality time without distractions. And I won't tell you about technology and our phones and how often our kids are seeing us glued to a screen. My kids will come to me and I have a laptop and a phone, and they're fighting for my attention from screens. And it's something to be very intentional about. And then lastly, with adolescents, we want to be present and near. I can't stress this enough. Like when we're talking about adolescents, because sometimes it is harder to get them to open up, you're just kind of around. Say much, right? But if you have to go work in the living room where they are. Maybe that sparks a conversation. Maybe it's noticing something that you can then talk about together. But what ends up happening a lot of times with older kids is they go to their room, you feel like, okay, khalas, and I can be in mine, and then everybody's kind of split up. But as the nearness is what helps at least some of those conversations to be natural. Respect their opinions, even if you disagree. This is very, very hard, but our kids want to hear what we want to share with them if they feel like their opinions are also respected. We talk so much about that, so we don't need to go too much into that. Be curious, ask open-ended questions, encourage them to problem solve independently. I think I have. Okay, when we're talking about adolescence, what we're really balancing for is two things: guidance and autonomy, okay? And so you'll find some parents who are really heavy on the guidance part, and then we have a lot of kids now going into college. So my husband, when he went into his first year of college, he had a roommate who still was getting all his classes registered by his mom, okay? His mom was the one meeting with the college guidance counselor, setting up his schedule and his classes. Like, I mean, you can see why that would be problematic, right? First, second, third, and fourth year of college. So that is somebody who's going to struggle to manage a lot of really normal life things, okay? So we don't want to take our hands off, but we want to balance that autonomy and that guidance piece and keep adjusting, right, as we go. Okay, to remain calm during disagreements. When I talk to teens and when anyone who works in this field or has any kind of conversation with teens and they say like, why is it sometimes hard for you to talk to your parents? What's the number one thing you think that they say? Because my parents overreact, okay? Like that is the word I hear very, very often. I know, John, if you hear. Overreact, because my parents overreact, okay? Now, I'm telling you, internally, you can still, have that thing happening, and it can be a dialogue with God and how to remain neutral, but, like practicing your poker face, it's like, kids come home and you're like, you did what? And with whom? Okay, being very, very careful that we're not allowing that to be what ends the conversation right then and there, okay? We want to acknowledge their need and their growing need for independence. As much time, and I think John touched on this too, but like anything that your kids can begin to do for themselves at this age, have them do it. Doesn't matter what it is, right? If they can sign up for a class, have them put in the credit card information, right? Be next to them, give them like anything that they can do for themselves at this age, they should be doing their best to have that independence and share personal stories they can learn from and then support their interests even if they're unfamiliar ones. Okay, so I don't want to take too much time because I know we've been talking a lot and there's been a lot of information at you, but I also want to make sure that the other group is coming so that we can wrap up the end of our day. No. I just wanted to make sure they weren't done. Okay, any thoughts about the communication piece? Are you mentally, emotionally tired yet? Is it a lot? I will let you all finish that, but I think the more that your kids can see that you are human, you are somebody who is learning and growing. I have a kid who's just like me in a lot of ways, so when I tell him, like, yeah, I struggle with the same thing, and he looks at me like, okay, like 30 years later, you're still struggling with the same thing, but I think that's the beauty of knowing that our kids can see in us a genuine, real person, and so I think it's effort. I wouldn't just share a story because I messed something up and khalas, but like, where's the repentance? Where is the change? Where is the effort to do something differently? It doesn't have to be perfect and neat. It doesn't have to be, like, here's step one of what mistake I made, how I fixed it, and how God made it all better. Like, that might not be every story, but where's the real, genuine heart behind it? But I don't know if you all have thoughts you want to add to that. I think context really matters too. I think age, where your child is at in the struggle of this thing. So like, if your child has made a mistake and has done something that has shaken their self-confidence in themselves or in God or in their community or with you, and then you're sharing a story that humanizes their experience of how you can understand and relate. That's really powerful, right? Like that's something that helps them to understand that here we are still working together, figuring things out. There's open, honest, heartfelt communication there, and that this doesn't have to define them. Like this isn't who you are because you made this one mistake, or like you did something that you regret later. Because I can tell you at some point, and this is why Archie has a really great talk about why some people who leave the church and some of the reasons they cite, but this idea of like regretting something, feeling shamed and judged because of it, that piece of the shame that then comes from like, I can't re-enter this community, I can't be near people who feel like this really bad thing is now all that I am. And when they don't have a relatable experience of somebody who did mess up, had experience with God, who can change their life. And at St. Athanasius in our church, when you walk through the doors, it's an icon of St. Moses the Strong and St. Mary of Egypt. And I love that because they are both models of repentance. Like you enter into the church as a sinner, as somebody in need of salvation, in need of a savior. And these are the models that we're putting in the entrance of the church, St. Mary of Egypt and St. Moses the Strong. So I love that. But sharing that with a 5, 6-year-old might look different than a 16-year-old. But I say, don't be afraid if it's not like glorifying the experience. Oh, we did this thing and it was so fun and we got away with it. Okay, that's going to be helpful. So let me just to come. Any other thoughts? Oh, yes, thank you. Do you want to just go through some other fun things while we're waiting? Okay, I'll share this with you because this is an area of research that I really love. So have you heard of the concept of emotional granularity before? Okay, so something really interesting in how God designed us and how designed the brain is when we're feeling, okay, so your ability, my ability to process emotional information is so much faster than cognitive information. So sometimes you feel something, you don't even know what you're feeling, and then the thought comes later. Even though our ability to process cognitive information is really, really, really fast, our ability to feel the emotion is even faster, okay? So sometimes you feel really gross and yucky and you don't know why, and then 2 seconds later you're like, oh, okay, this is the reason. Okay, so something that they've done a lot of research on is this concept called emotional granularity, which is your ability to identify the exact emotion that you're feeling. So remember when we talked earlier about naming emotions? This is so helpful, not just for you and your kids, but in interactions where it's really difficult, like when the dynamic is hard. Because when your brain is able to identify the exact emotion, so let's say it's not just because I'm angry, but I actually feel like I'm mourning something, like I'm feeling the loss of something. Well, when you do that, your brain actually sends soothing neurotransmitters to the rest of your body, and you actually begin to calm down. So it's a really powerful thing to help your child, number one, name their emotion. It sounds like you're really frustrated. It sounds like you're angry. It sounds like you feel disappointed that you didn't get this thing that you wanted. And even though it might seem like, okay, like, yeah, of course they know they're angry, of course they know they're frustrated, but when you help them with the words, they have this thing that God has created in their bodies, which gives them, again, a soothing sense of, okay, I feel heard, I feel known, I feel seen, and allows them to calm down. The same thing happens for us. Actually, your body will literally physically calm down. Your heart rate slows, you feel better, and it's just from, again, our ability to be self-conscious and aware. And I think God gave us this to help us to reach out to him. So if I go to God now in prayer with like, God, I actually feel a lot of shame about this, but it's now because I'm having a real conversation, again, about what I'm experiencing. So it's a really powerful thing. So those emotion charts, they're not like them. Like they really are very, very helpful. And even I give them to adults, like the really complicated ones with the big old wheels. Okay. Anything else? Oh, I'll share this with you guys too while you're waiting. Are you emotionally done? I'm just waiting for the group. Yes. Yeah. You got to come back up for air. You swim and you come back up. We're just waiting for them to come. Or we can just do like fun would you rather questions. Yeah. Yeah. Like that Saint Porphyrius quote of, become saints and you have no problems with your children. That one always gets me. It's a little hard. Okay, so maybe we can pause. Okay. Yes. Hi, everyone. So we're just going to do the raffle really quick and then just stand together and just do a quick prayer, and I will let you go. All of the information and the slides we will share from the emails that you shared with us. So if you didn't get the registration email, then that means something happened with your email. So if you got the email saying you got the schedule, then your email is correct for the day. So if you haven't, then come and add your email, okay? Yeah. Yeah, you should be very careful with your juice water. Thank you, Michael. Okay. Michael is going to help me pick out the raffle, okay? And so if we're ready, he's going to be our big helper. Okay, this is the paint basket. Pick one ticket, baby. That's how I know. Shireen Gadalla? Okay, awesome. So I'll give you the paint basket downstairs. Meshi, or you can just grab it on your way out. Okay. Michael, you ready for the next one? I feel like I'm on a talk show, and okay. You ready? So this is for the cooking basket. No, that's not, you have to pick a red one. Heidi Gali. Okay. Oh, you've been eyeing that basket. Okay. Okay. All right, this is for the books. We should have done this earlier. This is a lot more fun, right? You ready, Michael? Okay. A lot of people are counting on you, Michael. Michael McCary? Did Michael leave yet? Michael McCary? Michael McCary? Anybody there named Michael? Okay, we'll pick another one. Okay. Sorry, Michael, if you come later. Okay. All right, you ready? You can pick another one. Did you pick Michael because that was also your name? Okay. Savannah Doss? Or Sameh. Sorry, Sameh. Sameh Doss? Sameh? Okay, we're going to pick another one. All right, Michael, pick someone who's here, okay? Yeah, you should feel pressure. Okay. Matthew McGar? Oh, okay. So you get the books. Okay, they already left, but I can give it to you, the books. Meshi. Okay, very good. Okay. Okay, last one. Thank you for your patience. You ready, Michael? Last one. Mithat and Marianne Sidham. I think I know Mithat. But did they already leave? Mithat and Marianne? Meshi. Okay, sorry. They left early. I'm so sorry. Okay, Michael, one more. You got this? Magid Solomon. Okay. Okay, we'll give it to somebody else because they already got, they already got the books. Oh, different families? Oh, okay, then you'll get both. Okay. Okay, it's two different. Is she? Okay, sorry guys. Okay. Okay. Okay, Abuna.
So on your behalf, I want to thank all the servants who labored for today, the people who prepared the food for the adults and for the speakers, the people who did the babysitting specifically, because without these servants, we cannot have this day. So everyone who labored, I'm gonna call the names and come and take a small gift card from the church. And on behalf of all the people who attended, we want to thank you. Come quickly so we don't waste the time. Mariana Abdel Malik, Jessica Gerges, مونيكا بولس بلاش نسقف أنا عارف بس بلاش نسقف في الكنيسة. يوأنا حنا، أليكس Skander, Rose, Ilya, Jimmy, Elena. Thank you, Monica. Eva Tawfiq. انت كلوديا. ديانا. ديانا هي اللي عملت كل الفيس بينتينج. ثانك يو يا ديانا. مارتن. أسامة بولس. فارس. سوزان. أعتقد مش. ألفريد. بافلي خليل. شنودة. ورفيق. وسامح عبد الملك. مين؟ يلا تعالوا يا حبايبي. Then we're gonna stand up for prayer in just a minute when everyone takes their gifts. بسرعة. And thank you for the servants as well who organized this day, Archie and Clara and the speakers, Dalia and John. And hope to see you again, inshallah. Let's stand up for prayer. In the name of the Father and Son and the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. Thank you, God, for the church. We thank you for allowing us to be here today and to learn. Make us to hear and to do as well through the intercessions of Holy Virgin Saint Mary, Saint John the Beloved, all the saints. Make us worthy to pray thankfully, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. But deliver us from the evil one in Christ Jesus our Lord. Thine the kingdom, power. The love of God the Father, the grace of His only begotten Son, our Lord God and Savior Jesus Christ, the gift and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Go in peace. The peace of the Lord be with you.
I just want to put up a QR code for a feedback survey. So if you have anything that you want to share with how the day has been, or if there's anything that you think we can do better, we'll also send it in the email. But we really, really want to hear from you, because these days are for you and for all of us. But please let us know how we can continue to serve you. So we'll send this in the email, but if you have a minute or two to scan the QR code, and God bless you all, and please keep us in your prayers.